Welcome to the Spirituality Simplified YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to share with you my new keynote presentation that I recently gave. It's about 60 minutes long, unedited. Here's the entire thing. It has to do with my new book, Overcome the Overwhelm. And this is the corresponding speech, Overcoming Overwhelm. So you'll notice in the beginning, it's pretty heavy. I'm going to address suicide. The client in this one, they had 7 suicides in their organization last year. So really going deep right away. I hope you guys get so much out of it. I prepared a lot for this one. Really felt like I nailed it. And I'm so excited to hear what you think, what you get out of it, and how it's going to help you and your communities. So thank you so much for checking this out. And if you resonate with this, please consider giving this channel a subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, right? That's what it's all about. So enjoy. See you on the next video. Thank you everyone for having me so much. I imagine it's been an action-packed day with lots of emotions and really getting into the depths of our psyche. So we're not done yet. I will warn you guys that we're gonna go a little deep. That okay? All right, sweet, we're gonna do that. So I'm here to speak about overcoming overwhelm and the 6-step breath process to access inner peace. But before we get into that, I'd like to just share a few stories with you. So I'm going to get the screen black just for the next 20, maybe even 30 minutes, no slides, just being 100% present. Sound good? All right, we'll start with this story from about 16 years ago. I was a sophomore in college, and I'll never forget this day. It was February 3rd, 2008. And I'll always remember it, not because Eli Manning defeated Tom Brady and the Patriots for the first time, but because this was a day that really changed the trajectory of my life. It's when mental health became so important to me. You see, back then as a sophomore in a party school, Chico State in Northern California, we actually weren't doing the college thing. We were actually watching the Super Bowl, if you can believe it or not. And there was a bunch of us sitting around the couch after the game was over, just watching the post game. And there was so much commentary around family. Because if you remember, Peyton Manning, Eli's older brother, well, he was the quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts at the time, and he won the Super Bowl in 2006. So the commentary was like, oh, Peyton Manning must be such a proud older brother because here he is seeing his younger brother win the Super Bowl, and their father played in the NFL as well. So there's this big theme about family and like being a proud older brother and like really a feel-good story. So we're all just sitting there minding our own business and just watching the post game. And all of a sudden there's a knock on the door. It's a heavy knock. And we're like, what's that? And we open the door and there's our friend Jeff. And our friend Jeff is the older brother to Pete. Pete, who lived at the house with us. And Pete was in his room. So we open up the door and there's Jeff. And Jeff is wearing his cowboy boots, his Wranglers, a camo jacket, and a bright red shirt with white lettering that reads, Sunday Fun Day. Right, so imagine that. Cowboy boots, Wranglers, camo jacket, bright red shirt, Sunday Fun Day. Looking ridiculous, obviously, right? And also looking like he was having some fun at the bars, at Super Bowl parties. But his body language and his facial expression didn't match someone who had been partying and having a good time. In fact, he seemed worried. And that's when he came in and he said, where's Pete? And we said, Pete's in his room. And he starts to pace on over to Pete's room and he starts hammering on the door, Pete, Pete! And Pete's not answering. At this point in time, we hear a big thud and Jeff kicks down the door. He kicks it down. He kicks down the door. And that's when we hear a scream. And we get up from the couch and we run back there and we find our friend hanging from the ceiling fan with electrical cord. And not long before that, I actually noticed that Pete got out of his room and went back into his room with electrical cord. I thought it was odd, but I didn't think too much of it. You know, I didn't have the tools at the time. I understood that Pete might have been experiencing some depressive type symptoms, but I had no idea that there was suicidal ideation. Never in my wildest dreams could I contemplate that someone would be grabbing electrical cord to hang themselves from the ceiling fan on Super Bowl Sunday while the rest of us are just in the living room. So as we get him down from the ceiling fan, his older brother, Jeff, is giving him CPR, and we're calling the ambulance. And now remember, this was just minutes before this. The commentary was about Peyton Manning, such a proud older brother of his younger brother winning the Super Bowl. And here we have two of my good friends, one of my friends who has just hung himself, and another one of my friends, his older brother, who is literally pulling him down from the ceiling fan, giving him CPR. You can imagine how that felt, right? And just the dichotomy of that. So the rest of the night we spent in the hospital. And Pete stayed on life support for about a week, maybe it was 2 weeks, until his family made the inconceivable and correct decision to pull the plug. And I tell you that story for several reasons. The first of being, I understand that we're all survivors of suicide in this room. Secondly, I tell that story to bring about emotions, and it's an invitation to notice how you're feeling. So in these next few minutes, or even few seconds, notice if there's any swirling thoughts. Notice if your heart is racing. Notice where in your body you're feeling this, right? Because this is the opportunity that we have to lean into this discomfort, to feel these feelings so that we can move through them. As we go through this journey of highs and lows in the next hour or so, I should check the time because I think we started a little bit early, but with that as well, understand that the secret to overcoming overwhelm is that there's nothing to overcome. You see, it's that energy of trying to overcome something that keeps us stuck. It's that lack of acceptance. It's that resistance. And this is what we're going to dive into today. So right now, since there's a little bit of a heavier energy, I hope you can feel this heavy energy so that we can move through it. The first thing that I'd like to invite us to do is just to shake it out. That was a lot, right? Just take your wrists, your arms, and just shake it out. Just shake it out. Yeah, just let it out. You can put your arms back down. And what we're going to talk about right here is energetic hygiene. You see, there's constantly different energies being exchanged. In fact, science teaches us that our bodies has a 90-second physiological response when we experience an emotion. And you see, emotions are energy in motion. So if we don't allow ourselves to feel these energies, well, those energies get stuck and they get stored in the body. We start ignoring it, and then we're stacking more and more energy, versus if we can give ourselves 2 minutes to feel that emotion and to allow it to move through us. So what we're going to do is a simple practice of something called a lion's breath. It's an ancient yogic breathwork practice that's really good to relieve stress, anxiety, tension, and frankly, I like it because it's a reminder to play and not take life too seriously. So what we'll do is we're going to inhale all the way up through the nose, look at your nose, stick your tongue out like Gene Simmons, and let it all go. Sound good? I'll do it first. I'll demonstrate first. So one thing I really would like to encourage and invite everyone here to think about is as you're inhaling up, allow yourself to feel a denser, heavier emotion. Maybe it's something that came up just right now in hearing this story, or maybe it's something that came up earlier in the day, or maybe it's something you've been holding on to for the past few weeks, months, or even years. Allow yourself to feel that as you inhale. Then when we exhale, we're going to get it out of our energetic field. We're going to send it back to the land. We're giving it back to the earth. The earth can carry that energy. You guys ready? All right. Big inhale all the way up through the nose. Inhale up. Think about that thing that you want to let go of. Look at your nose. Stick out your tongue like Gene Simmons and exhale. Let it out. Let it go. Nicely done. Give yourselves a hand. Well done. Well done. Well, that's a warm up. That's a practice. We're going to do one more. All right. So on this one, go ahead and inhale up through the nose. Hold that breath. Think about that thing you want to release. Look at your nose. Stick out your tongue like Gene Simmons and let it out. Nicely done. See, we can start to feel like we're moving some energy, right? Well, one last time for good measure, okay? Inhale all the way up. Think about that thing that you want to let go of. Look at your nose, stick out your tongue like Gene Simmons and let it out. All right, give yourselves a hand. That was great. That was great. Now, the point of doing that exercise was so that we could all feel this collective energy, because I hope that each and every one noticed that when I was speaking about witnessing my friend who had hung himself, how there was a stillness, there was a heaviness, there was a denseness in the room and with each and every one of us. And remember that science teaches us we can process these emotions in 90 seconds. Well, what did we just do? We just took a couple of minutes to allow ourselves to feel that emotions, and look at all the laughter and the smiles and the lightness in the room. You know, this isn't just like woo-woo nonsense. It's actually backed by science. It's called the 90-second rule. Our bodies process emotions in 90 seconds. So that's the first story. The second story, before we get into the 6-step breath process, this is kind of a fun one. And this one, I'm going to loop it all at the end and show you this ironic, very profound realization I had over the past few weeks in preparing for something. So with that, just a few weeks ago, I found myself in Sugar Land, Texas, which is near Houston. And for context, I'm a California guy, so that's a little bit away from home. But I was out there to deliver a TED Talk, and this TED Talk was on this message I have of soul-life balance as opposed to work-life balance. Well, in preparing for this TED Talk, I started to realize something that where I was out of integrity. And that's the part I'm just going to put to the side, and we're going to come back to that by the end of this presentation. So what I'm going to do right now is put on my acting face. I'm just going to step over here, mentally prepare. Then the next 15, 20 minutes, I'm going to perform, take off that mask, and then we're going to unpack it together with the 6-step breath process. Sound good? Cool. Let me just get ready over here. All right, action. One of my favorite movies is called Soul. Just that, nothing else. 4 letters joining together to form the word soul. And in this movie, the main character, Joe Gardner, well, he lives his life desperately wanting to be a famous and well-recognized musician. And when he finally gets his big break, he goes through a series of trials and tribulations, but he ultimately ends up at his dream gig, and he makes it there. And on the night of Joe's performance, he plays his heart out on the piano. He was in sync, he was in flow, he was in the zone, and letting his spark shine through. The experience was everything Joe had ever imagined. That is until the lights from the jazz club turned off, and all the people were gone, and Joe was left with this feeling like almost confusion and a letdown, like something was wrong. And it's that point in this Pixar movie when the camera closes in on Joe, and with a look of dismay, Joe says, "All my life, I've been waiting on this day. I thought I'd feel different." Now, my question for all of us is, let's look at Joe and compare him to ourselves. Has there ever been a time in your life when you've chased a dream, chased a goal, put every single thing, every ounce of your being into that thing to feel more fulfilled, to feel more whole, to feel more worthy? I know I have. In fact, I've done it many times, from being named to Silicon Valley's 40 under 40 list to building a 7-figure business, yet I was always left with a similar feeling to our friend Joe. And maybe you guys can relate to this too. I know this was the case for me and also for our friend Joe, but it's almost like we were doing all this external chasing of success to fill an inner hole. In fact, for me, it got so deep and dark and went through another numbing depression just 5 years ago in 2019. And as I allowed myself to really feel what was coming up to the surface, I realized that on a subconscious level, I was saying to myself, when I achieve ABC, I will feel XYZ. Now, on a subconscious level, meaning I didn't realize I was saying this, because you see, our subconscious makes up 95% of our awareness. And we don't have access to that awareness. We only have 5% access to our awareness, and that's our conscious awareness. So if we don't bring light to what our subconscious is dictating, then we're just aimlessly living through life. And on a subconscious level, I was basically saying to myself, when I am named to Silicon Valley's 40 Under 40 list, well, then I'll feel worthy. When I build this successful company, then I'll be happy. Yet you see, that was not the case at all. And after achieving those things, that's what sent me in a deeper depression. And it was in sitting with the darkness and accepting where I was at that I started to hear a whisper. And this whisper, you know the whisper that I'm talking about. It's not anything that you're actually hearing. It's a message. It's an inner knowing. It's like the muse, right? We're all inner artists, and the muse speaks to us. And the muse had a message of 3 simple words: soul, life, balance. And I thought to myself, okay, like soul, life, balance, that's like work-life balance, but soul, life, balance, got it. And the old version of me would have been like, okay, I'm going to move on, go about my life. That's interesting. But this new version of me, of who I was becoming, did the opposite. I was learning to soften. I was learning to slow down and to be with my thoughts and feelings. And I thought to myself, this feels like something outside myself coming in. And I know this feeling from being an entrepreneur, when those business ideas or even being an artist, they come in and you know that's not necessarily from you. And I'm like, there's something here. And I sat with that. And as I sat with that more, this message and vision of soul life balance started to crystallize. And now here I stand before you 5 years later with this vision fully crystallized. You see, soul life balance is a reframe of work life balance where we prioritize our own mental health first and foremost, while simultaneously realizing that work is just part of the human experience. It's moving beyond hustle culture. It's a reclamation of our own inner world, of our mental and emotional state. Now, I wear this yin-yang shirt for a reason, because soul life balance at its very core is the practical application of the symbol yin and yang, or yang. And the light side of the symbol actually represents the outer world, how we experience the world with our 5 senses. It's how we move through the world, responsibilities, obligations. It's the fact that really we're human doings as opposed to our innate essence of human beings. Whereas the dark side of the yin yang, well, that makes up the yin. The yin is our internal world. And our internal world is our emotional or mental state. It's our thoughts and our feelings. It has to do with receptivity and intuition. It's our innate essence as a human being. So now when we take the yin yang and we apply this to work-life balance, we can now so clearly see that of course we're facing a mental health crisis. Work-life balance is double yang. That is to say that both work and life are about how we move through life, how we show up, responsibilities, obligations. In fact, the mental health crisis has gotten so bad that in America, 90% of adults believe that we're in a mental health crisis by a recent study by KFF. Not only that, but 73% of people negatively experience stress. 73% of people experience stress that negatively impacts their mental health. That's another stat by GetNux. So it's clear that we're in a mental health crisis. And I believe the way forward is through this practice of soul life balance by prioritizing your mental health above all else, mental and emotional and physical. Can't forget about the physical. So with this, there seems to be this disconnection from ourselves, this disconnection from our internal world of our thoughts and feelings. And I also believe that this disconnection from ourselves leads us to feeling disconnected from other people, which puts us in a deeper hole of mental health issues because, you see, as human beings, we're social animals. We're social creatures. We thrive and we crave off of community and connection. But think about it this way. Just imagine a recent time when you were just minding your business and walking through your day, and you started to make eye contact with a stranger. Now, this happens all the time. I see it with other people. I experience it myself. I do it as well. But you start to make that eye contact with the stranger, and then either one or both of you look away, right? We've all been there. And it's not like something we've been there like 20 years ago, like we were probably there yesterday or a few days ago. You start to make eye contact with someone, then one or both looks away. It's almost like, oh no, you saw me, I can't be seen. And this is that disconnection from our inner world of not having confidence and feeling good with who we are, where we don't want to be seen, where when we put the energy and intention into our mental and emotional state, now all of a sudden we're able to connect with people on our deeper level. We're able to rise above seeing the differences and instead see the similarities between each other. And all of this is the practice of soul-life balance that can help us rise above the mental health crisis. Now, in addition to this, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about daily habits and behaviors. And this brings me back to three and a half years ago. I was in Costa Rica for a month. I was doing a yoga teacher training out there. And it was 90-degree weather. It was beautiful. It was amazing. Back home in California, it was thick of winter. Yeah, California winter, you guys are Arizona, but it's still same difference, right? But what I say is 90-degree weather and having the ocean right there is pretty legit, and winter is still winter, no matter where you are. So with that being said, I was out there for a month doing a yoga teacher training, and one day we were in this outdoor yoga studio, and it was overlooking the ocean, up in the jungle, immersed in the elements. You could hear the jungle, the locusts, they're constantly buzzing. So we're out there, big glass windows overlooking the ocean, and one of our instructors, Dakota Shea, he said something that changed my life forever. And what he said was, to name your ultimate potential is to limit your ultimate potential. Now, I'll say that again. To name your ultimate potential is to limit your ultimate potential. In that moment, my mind was blown. It all made so much sense. I had been focusing on all the wrong things. I had been focusing on my goals. I even wrote a book called The Written Goal, right? I was a goal setter in achieving these things. Yet every time I achieved something, I felt more empty. So it all clicked. It was like an out-of-body experience when Dakota said to name your ultimate potential is to limit your ultimate potential. I realized in that moment that I was naming my ultimate potential. I could literally feel new neural networks wiring and firing in my brain in between the howls of the monkeys and the chirps and the barks of the gecko. I was literally having like an out-of-body experience. It was that profound for me. And when I started to come back into the room and, get present, stop going lost in your mind, piecing things together, there's more here, right? I noticed that Dakota and his wife, Bridget, were on to the next lesson. And they're teaching us about the yogic philosophy of sadhana. And sadhana teaches us to be in pursuit of. It's a prioritization of your daily habits and behaviors. Because by doing this, now we can access our ultimate potential of how we want to feel on the inside on a day-to-day basis. And this is great. I think it's entirely so imperative that we find ways to get our mental health going through daily habits and behaviors. Yet I like to take it one step further to moment-to-moment awareness. And we can do that with the 3 themes of soul life balance. And those themes are breathe, feel, and think intentionally. So it'll look like this. We all experience triggers from time to time, right? And not to name a trigger, we'll just think of it as something that keeps us out of the present moment. We're now either in the future or we're in the past. And we have a choice. We can either respond or we can react. And reacting is to disassociate, it's to numb, it's to distract, it's to avoid. Now, when I'm reacting to a trigger, when I'm avoiding it, looks like this. So I feel something and I'm walking over to a cupboard. I get a big bag of pistachios, like big bag, not small bag, big bag. Then I walk my way over to this counter I have that conveniently has a trash can right here. So what I do is I set the bag down on the counter, open up the trash can, pick up the bag, put a bunch in my palm, And next thing you know, I'm cracking the shell, tossing the pistachio in my mouth and tossing the shell in the trash. And a few minutes goes by, or maybe 5-10 minutes, and a half bag later of a big bag. And I think to myself, what am I doing? Because I'm just getting lost in crack, toss, toss, crack, toss, toss, crack, toss, toss. And it's in that moment that I'm thinking, what am I doing that I now have the opportunity to respond? And yes, for me, it usually manifests with emotional and binge eating, and that is common for a lot of people, but there's other ways too. For some people, it could be checking out on video games. For the workaholics in the room, it might be checking your email and seeing if there's something you need to do to use work as an escape, or maybe it's getting lost on social media. I think we've all been there, 5, 10, 20, 30, hopefully not an hour or longer, but scrolling and having that feeling of, what am I doing? And it's in that moment that you have that thought, what am I doing? That's the opportunity to go from reacting to responding. So back to my story with the pistachios here, right? So I'm cracking the shells, and usually when I have this realization of what am I doing, I have a lot of shame and guilt at that point because I've nearly gone through a massive bag of pistachios, and I think I'm mindfully using pistachios because I have to earn them by cracking the shell, and I'm working out my fingers. This is literally the story I tell myself. So I'm doing that, right? And then I'm like, okay, I gotta make a change. Well, at that point, I still have a few pistachios in my palm, and I mean, I'm human, right? So I'm gonna finish those. I'm not gonna put them back in the bag. And then yeah, right. And then I seal the bag. I put the bag away. I walk over and take a seat. And this is when I can utilize the 3 themes of soul-life balance: breathe, feel, and think intentionally. And it'll look like this. Put the bag down, walk over, take a seat, and I close my eyes. And I start to connect with my breath. And I start to breathe. As I continue to breathe, long inhales, deep exhales, I start to feel, because remember, these emotions are energy in motion. So I start to feel these different emotions coming up, and I allow myself to be with them. And then I let them move through me. And after I process the emotions, well, it's at that point that now I've earned the right to invoke the power of positive thinking. And we're going to unpack that statement more because that is a big one right there. So again, the 3 themes of soul life balance to cultivate moment-to-moment awareness are breathe, feel, and think intentionally. All right, so mask off, now I'm back. Now we're going to get into the slides. We're going to continue that and come back to that later. But now what we're going to do is switch into the 6-step breath process. So the first thing to note is that overwhelm is a signal. You know, I mentioned it earlier, but typically, when we experience overwhelm, it will say either I'm feeling overwhelmed or, someone else will say they're overwhelmed. But underneath that is unprocessed traumas and it's unprocessed energies, emotions, right? So instead of saying overwhelm, I'd invite you to consider, what am I actually feeling? Because overwhelm could be a good thing. I'm overwhelmed with joy and love and gratitude, right? Or I'm overwhelmed with stress, anxiety, or I'm overwhelmed with grief. And this whole process of this theme today of the Mental Health Symposium is being real and honest with your emotions. So know that overwhelm is so much more than just simply overwhelm. And let's get a layer deeper and actually address what that emotion is. So these are the 6 steps right here. Feel free to take a picture of this. That is a QR code, by the way, to grab my new book, which came out about a month ago. It's on sale for just, I think, $6 right now. It'll go back up to the normal price in the next few days if you want to check it out. But these are the 6 steps. It's the breath process. It's an acronym. First, we have breathe to slow down, relax to feel, energy to reveal, accept to surrender, transform into empowering beliefs, and habits to integrate. So over the next 30 minutes, we'll be unpacking each and every one of these. One thing I do want to point out with these 6 steps is it's the 3 themes of soul life balance just expanded. If there's anything at all that you get out of this presentation today, let it be this, the 90-second rule. If you're going to write anything down, write these 5 things down. The 90-second rule. And remember that the 90-second rule teaches us that our bodies process emotions in 90 seconds. The second thing is emotions are energy in motion. And the final thing is the 3 themes of soul life balance. Breathe, feel, and think intentionally. The 6 steps are here to go deeper, but in the moment, it's going to be really hard to remember, especially when you're first starting to work with those 6 steps. So remember these 5 things, which are the 90-second rule. Emotions are energy in motion. And what do you do in that 90 seconds? Well, you're certainly not putting on a stopwatch and counting for 90 seconds, right? We're not doing that. We're going to breathe, feel, and think intentionally. And we're going to unpack each of them with these 6 steps. So earlier this year, I had a client, coaching client, who was putting on a 10,000 person music festival. And it was 2 weeks before the music festival, and she was getting really stressed. She had a lot of overwhelm, right? And I started to talk with her about like, hey, what's going on? Walk me through how you wake up and what you do before bed. What's your morning and evening routine? Because a lot of this stems from our morning and evening routine. And she was doing all the things that anyone into mindfulness or even into spirituality would want to do so that you're really taking care of your mental health. That includes journaling, breath work, meditation, yoga, all these sorts of things. So my next question was like, wow, that's a lot. You're doing breath work, meditation, journaling, and yoga. That's a lot. So I had to ask her a few more questions, because what happens when you're new on this path, it happens with almost everyone, is we go back to that yang energy. Remember, yang energy is about doing. And we approach our mindfulness like a to-do list and be like, oh, well, I heard these things are good. So you start to approach it in doing, being check, 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 check. And you're actually not doing mindfulness, because mindfulness is about being present in the moment and realizing, oh, I have all these different tools and modalities. Which one do I actually need right now? As opposed to creating a to-do list. So after asking her a few questions, it was clear that she definitely wasn't approaching it like a to-do list. So I was like, cool. Your morning routine is established, solid. So is your evening routine. Walk me through your day. And all of a sudden, she starts explaining all these fires she has. Obviously not physical fires, but these different fires that she needs to put out, right? Just very similar to, I'm sure, a lot of you experience in your day-to-day. So I said, okay, well, what happens when you experience that? And that's when she paused. And it was almost like, what do you mean? Asking for clarification. I'm like, well, what do you do to like center and ground yourself? And she wasn't processing any of it. And most of us, myself included, before getting on this path, we're never taught these things. We don't know how to actually process how we're feeling, especially when all of a sudden we switch into fight or flight like that because of a fire that happens at work. Well, the 6-step breath process, or the 3 themes of soul life balance that you just learned, and the 5 things we just went over, is exactly what I taught her. And over the next 2 weeks, she was able to manage her day without all of the stress, without the overwhelm, without the anxiety. And not only that, since she was the leader of the festival, her employees felt that too. Her coworkers, right? Because we're energetic beings. We're exchanging energy, and it comes from the top down. We're all managers and leaders in this room, right? It starts with us. We need to take care of ourselves first. And we cannot be those toxic leaders that are creating more challenges for our people. Right? So that's how you can actually apply this in real time. So the first step is breathe to slow down. And we'll start with just some light breath work. The idea is basically that there's 2 sides to breath work. It's a big term right now. I know you guys did some breath work earlier. Breath work is trending so much that online searches went up 40% from 2023 to 2024. And it creates a lot of challenges with the industry because people are using different terms. So I'm going to teach this to you guys. The first thing to note is the parasympathetic nervous system. This is a big word. It's hard to spell for some of us, right? But it means rest and digest. And that's really what we want to get into. We want to get into a place of rest and digest. Because of the nature of our society and how fast things move, we're usually in fight or flight. So breathwork exercises are to get you into rest and digest. I believe you guys did box breathing earlier. That's a great example of something that's rest and digest. Same as the lion's breath. There are a lot of examples. The other side to this is a breathwork journey. And a breathwork journey can be as short as maybe 30 minutes, and as long as over 3 hours. I typically, when I lead a breathwork journey, have it between 30 to 60 minutes. And basically what we're doing is activating the sympathetic nervous system. That is fight or flight. And the reason why we're doing this is because, like we learned earlier, emotions are energy in motion. And when we experience, especially a trauma, and if we don't have the tools, that story and that energy gets stuck in the body. So by mimicking a stress response, we allow the body to release that stored energy, whether it's trauma or daily stressors. And I like to equate this to like a gazelle getting chased by a lion. If that gazelle is lucky enough to not get eaten and get away, what does it do after it gets away? It shakes and it convulses, right? Because it's allowing itself to remove the trauma it just experienced. Whereas humans, just like in the example earlier with the 10,000 person music festival, got to do the next thing, can't feel, robot, right? That's how we are. So if you practice breathwork exercises on a daily basis, or even maybe not daily, but at least a few times a week, you're starting to learn how to regulate your nervous system. And these deep dives of a breathwork journey, we can reserve those for maybe once a year, maybe once a quarter, more often if you're really working through something. So with that, there are also 3 rules of breathwork as it relates to activating rest and digest. That's the parasympathetic nervous system. The first is to elongate the exhale. By elongating your exhale, it helps to shift you into rest and digest. The second rule is to breathe through your nose. If you notice that when you're just like listening to me speak or anything like that, your mouth is open, you're a mouth breather. And there's not anything wrong with it other than that activates fight or flight. So start to focus on breathing through your nose. The final thing is diaphragmatic breathing or deep belly breaths. Expand your belly like a balloon when you inhale. So those are the 3 rules of breath work. And here are some benefits as well. You can also scan that if you'd like to learn more about breathwork. It takes to a page on my website which talks about Breath Club and tons of benefits. But the main thing you need to know is this can do 2 main great things for you. It can relieve stress, anxiety, all those denser emotions, and it can also bring in those lighter feelings and unlock creativity as well as vitality and so many other things. So integration is like literally my favorite word because it means taking action. And now that we're at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that you guys were exposed to. I would not recommend to try to do every single thing, obviously. But for each one of these steps in my presentation, I'm going to recommend an action step if you'd like to take it. And this one's simple. It's something you can do right now. For the rest of this presentation, just notice your breath. See if you can focus on slow inhales through the nose and letting your exhales be longer and slower. And there's a few reasons I like this. One is you're now training your nervous system to breathe this way. If you practice this on a daily basis, then your nervous system's like, oh, wow, I don't need to hold my breath. And think about it this way too. When you're writing an email or even when you're eating any of these things, think about different activities you have. How often are you holding your breath? I'm a writer, right? I've written 6 books, 3 in the past 3 years, and I'm not blogging weekly at the current time, but I do a lot of writing, and I constantly have to check myself. I'm like, oh, I'm holding my breath again. So it's a practice. It's a practice. And the other thing that this is really good for, and this is something I've been doing for years and my clients love it, and I always am shocked to hear the feedback, how like big this is for people. But when you're in conversation with someone else and you know how you have those racing thoughts and you're thinking about what you're gonna be saying next, well, instead, focus on your breath. If you focus on long, slow inhales and exhales, then you're no longer going to be thinking about those thoughts and you can be more present with that person. So try it out now as I'm speaking. Notice if you have those thoughts coming up, and if you do, come back to your breath. 2 great reasons. It helps to be more present with the other person and you're training your nervous system. So the second step is relax to feel. This is all about allowing yourself to feel these different emotions that are moving through you. And we can do this through something that's called the cyclic sigh. And the greatest part about this is it's literally the easiest form of breath work there is. It's an inhale all the way up through the nose. You sip in a bit more air at the top, and then you exhale through your mouth. Now, Dr. Andrew Huberman, who leads the Stanford School of Medicine, their lab, his lab did an experiment to figure out what's going to be the most impactful way to relieve stress and anxiety and overwhelm in real time. And they compared different forms of breath work and meditation. And what they found is that this practice of the cyclic sigh is more effective than anything else to alleviate stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. Not only in the moment, but around the clock, meaning that you have benefits going for the rest of your day. So again, it's just inhale all the way up through your nose, and then sip in a bit more, and then through the mouth, exhale. It's that simple. So what I would recommend is to write down cyclic sigh as well and practice that for 5 minutes, put it on your calendar for the next 3 days, and just notice how you feel. It's something that when you start to deploy this 6-step breath process, it's something super simple you can come to, because again, you wouldn't want to be sitting there for 90 seconds just doing lion's breath over and over, right? I mean, maybe you would if you like Kundalini like I do. That's a form of yoga, and that's for a different purpose and reason. But in truth, in reality, what kind of breathing are you going to be doing when you take 2 minutes to feel the cyclic sigh? Inhale all the way up, sip in a bit more air at the top, exhale through the mouth. So the third step is energy to reveal. And this is all about getting curious and asking the question, what is this showing to me? What is it revealing to me? What is the lesson? Because these energies that are moving through us are all here to teach us something. So allow yourself to get curious. And I actually have this refrigerator magnet, this picture right here. I don't have it currently. It's in my Amazon cart. I'm about to buy another. I've been traveling, so I didn't buy it yet. But this thing is amazing. As silly as it is for a grown adult to have this thing on their fridge, a lot of us have been so disconnected from our feelings, we don't actually even know how we feel. So one of my favorite things about this magnet is not only does it give me a lot of options to choose how I feel, but when I'm opening the fridge for maybe a coconut water, or maybe those little cheese things from Whole Foods, the little container, those are so good. Whatever your thing is that you go to in the fridge, real quick, before opening the fridge, look at the magnet and be like, what am I feeling? And then throughout the day as well, you can start to trace and see how am I feeling? Because remember, we're constantly feeling different ways. Our bodies process these emotions in 90 seconds. The 6 main feelings are right here on the left: happiness, sad, disgust, fear, surprise, and anger. So that's a good start as well, but really start to get present with what you're feeling. And the more I started to get curious, hey, what is this energy here revealing to me? It actually unveiled what I like to call my sad story. And SAD stands for Seasonal Affectiveness Disorder. And as a child, I don't know how old I was probably in middle school, I was going to therapy, and my therapist asked me, have you ever heard of SAD before? And he went on to tell me what it was. And I'm just sitting there especially now as an adult looking back, of course I haven't heard this. How would I have heard of this? What are you asking me here? But basically, he went on to tell me that a big reason why I experienced depression or heaviness or darkness or just kind of lethargy is the seasonal affectiveness disorder. Again, growing up in California, I want to be respectful to people that actually have winter, because we don't really have winter, but still the gray skies, the rain and all of that stuff, I could really feel how dense it was. And this is a story that I've carried with me my entire life. I went deep down the rabbit hole of mental health, spirituality, mindfulness only 5 years ago, but I put everything I had into it. And I realized in the past several years how much this has been impacting my mental health. And I'm proud to say now, for the past 2 years, I would say the past 2 winters, I have built a completely new relationship with the gray weather, the rain, and everything that brings up those depressive type symptoms. You see, now instead I think about creative expression. I picked up the guitar, I started to paint, I started cooking. Cooking is an amazing creative outlet. I don't know if I've ever, since maybe a little kid, I like to cook and I use recipes, but I don't use recipes. And even if you do use recipes, that's still a creative expression. right? So there's all these different forms of creative expression. And even with the last book, I wrote that during winter, right? So it's starting to get curious. Okay, what's coming up for me, and looking at these stories, and then you can take action on it later. So third step, once again, energy to reveal. This is a good place right here to take a picture. There's a bunch of journaling prompts, but the main goal here is to identify a subconscious story. Again, with my story of my sad story, seasonal affectiveness disorder, that's something I was able to work through as a result of going through journaling prompts like this. So how you would use this third step in the 6-step breath process is to allow yourself to see the lesson. Ask yourself, what's the story? What's the lesson here? And the fourth step is accept to surrender. And this isn't surrender like white flag, like I give up, I'm quitting. No, it's about acceptance and understanding where you're at. Because when you start to really go deep with the third step of letting this energy reveal something to you, a lot of times you're going to be, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to see that. I don't have time for this. I don't want, maybe it's a repressed memory. Whatever it is, we're going to be in resistance. So the true magic in this whole 6-step breath process is to accept. Because we need to allow ourselves to accept these different energies so that they can move through us. And not only that, so that we can move forward in our lives. So I like to think about parts work here. This is also known as internal family systems, or it's a psychotherapy practice. And it basically teaches us that we have these different thought forms. We have multiple thought forms that make up the totality of our psyche. Now, this would take minimum maybe 30 minutes to explain, like so that you guys can really get it, but 60 minutes would be good as well. So I'm just giving a high level. But basically, like for me, I know when I become like defiant or bratty or anything like that, I'm like, oh, hey, homie, because homie represents my inner child. Bratty, gives up, quitter, all this type of stuff. And how I got that nickname, I don't remember this, but my parents told me this. I couldn't say my S's, and I would say homie no himming, which meant Sammy no swimming. And to give you a glimpse into this kind of brat energy, me saying Sammy no swimming or homie no himming, like I swim all the time now. I love swimming, right? So like it's a good reminder of me, like, typically when I have that first inclination of like, no, I don't want to do that. It's like, oh, okay, there's my internal part coming up. So the way I work with this, because there's multiple parts, is first to give them a name, and they represent different characteristics of your psyche. And you can think of it as like almost like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, where like in those type of shows, there's the king or the queen sitting on the throne in the big hall. And then at the front is like a village person coming up to voice a grievance, right? So I imagine myself as the king, and maybe king or queen, of your inner queendom or kingdom. And then when I see this part, specifically with homie, I see him as like the village person coming up to voice a grievance. So literally, I'm just closing my eyes, imagining myself in there, and all I'm doing is saying thank you. I'm not getting lost in stories or getting in an argument or rebutting anything homie has to say. I'm simply holding space for him. And by doing that, then it's almost like a defense mechanism where he's like, what's going on? Because he wants to get in that argumentative nature. That's our thought forms, right? But by just accepting them, they start to pass through us. And this is how we can access inner peace and have less of an internal dialogue of these parts chattering. So again, IFS, parts work, a lot more to be said there. I'm going to give a QR code and a few slides that you can take for a free 5-day challenge, which has a visualization and journaling prompts to help unpack that if you would like to explore it. But I would say a good thing to use in this 4th step of accepting is to get into parts work. It makes it a lot easier to accept what's coming up for you. Now we have the 5th step, which is transform into empowering beliefs. The first 4 steps are all what Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, would call shadow work, exploring the shadow. It's getting to know those parts of ourselves that we don't know and making them conscious, making them known. Now, that was a lot of deep work we just did. And by doing that deep work, we've now earned the right to invoke positive thinking. Because there's this movement of like, Never feel negative, never think negative, just always be positive and kind and always be happy. And I believe that's like the worst advice we can give, because what we're doing is we're dissociating, we're numbing, and we're distracting ourselves from actually feeling that. And that thought form or that feeling lands in our body and it gets stuck and stored in the body. Then we have to go do a lot of healing to address that. So if we catch this up front and we're like, hey, emotions are energy in motion, let me feel this, and let me do something about it, then I can get into positive thinking. Then, okay, now we're doing the work, and we're going to end on a high note. So we're going to get into just here a few things. And I love this visual. I mean, just Michael Jordan, come on, so great. But Michael Jordan used to say, yeah, I have fear, but I attack that fear. And this is what I always saw in my mind's eye as a kid with Michael Jordan. That's literally him flying through the air, attacking that fear. So whether you're in what some people would call a dark night of the soul, which is a massive, we can think of it as a wave of depression, which is never a night. Typically it may last weeks or months, even longer. Or you're just feeling a heaviness and a denseness, my invitation is to attack that feeling. This is where I tell some people, unleash the beast. Let's not get stuck in that vibration, in that frequency of just, oh, poor me. Remember, everything in your life is happening for you and not to you. So this is where we can use this motivation to attack that fear. And for those of you that are Saturday Night Live fans and remember Stuart Smalley from the 90s, there's so much truth to this silly skit. I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. It's about I am statements. When you're creating positive affirmations or empowering beliefs, we're not saying I will be or I would like to be or anything like that, because that's telling your subconscious, which makes up 95% of your awareness, you're telling your subconscious, I am not that, by saying I will be. And your subconscious receives that and is like, okay, I'm not that. So if you want to say I'm confident and you say I will be confident, you're telling yourself, I'm not confident. And your subconscious hears that, and then you walk away that way, which is why we're saying I am, right? So I am statements when we get into affirmations and positive beliefs. So this is all number 5 when we're transforming the heavier, denser emotions into light and positivity. And this is your integration action here with the QR code I mentioned a little bit earlier, where you can access that free 5-day challenge to shatter limiting beliefs. It's a visualization where I'm going to walk you through feeling these different sensations in your body, noticing the negative patterns in your mind, and then reframing it. And we also get into IFS work, parts work as well. So finally, one of the most important steps, habits to integrate. And this brings us back to our conference today and being the closing of the conference. And thinking back, what are you going to do as a result of what you experienced today? So often we go to an event, a conference, or something that kind of has us inspired. We're like, oh yeah, I'm going to make that change. And then the next day comes, then the next day, and then we never do anything with it. So to integrate is to take action. And I love the old proverb of how do you eat an elephant? And the answer to that question is one bite at a time. Now, don't ask me why we would eat an elephant. I don't know the answer to that. But the point is one bite at a time. So one step at a time. Please do not overwhelm yourself, right? For the sake of this presentation alone, with trying to do everything, take small steps. See what seems most present and what's most alive to you when you start to implement and integrate different things that came up for you today. Now, as it relates for the 6-step breath process, when you're taking a pause, a 2-minute pause to feel into your body of what's going on, this is where this 6th step links back to the 3rd, energy to reveal. When that lesson is coming through to you, that gives you a very clear indication and roadmap of an action, habit, or behavior to take. So I tell people all the time, like, hey, I don't want you doing the 6-step breath process, because if you're doing that, that means you're processing a lot of things, right? My goal is like, yeah, use it as a tool, but hopefully you're not using it too often, because if you're using it all the time, you're probably not going deep enough on step number 3 or 4, energy to reveal, accepting and surrender, and or you're not taking action and making positive changes as a result of what came up. So these 6 steps really are about those 3 themes, like to keep it super, super simple. Breathe, feel, and think intentionally. And remember that your body's process emotions in 90 seconds. And SHATTER, this is a room in the yoga studio that I mentioned earlier in Costa Rica. I already kind of went over that. So the question is, who are you becoming? This is a question that can help us as we're integrating. So the final thing is the truth. Now, I told you guys earlier that I did this TED Talk, right? And I told you guys about I actually gave a portion of the TED Talk, and part of what I shared was, when I achieve ABC, I will feel XYZ, right? So for the first 3 days of preparing for that TED Talk, I found myself, it wasn't until I kind of noticed it, but you know what I was talking about earlier with the whisper and how like it's kind of unclear and it's kind of there, and how our subconscious makes up 95%. It's hard to really get, but I kind of had this feeling like something's off here. And then I noticed on that 3rd day that I was lying to myself, and I was lying to the potential audience, because here I am saying what got me in this depression, what got me into this battle with my mental health, was constantly chasing successes and focusing on the end destination. And saying to myself, when I achieve ABC, I will feel XYZ, and naming my ultimate potential. And in those first 3 days of preparing TED Talk, I was saying to myself, on a subconscious level, when I deliver this TED Talk, maybe this will be the thing that takes me to that next level. You see that? You see that? So it's a practice. It's a practice. And the name of the game is awareness. Because in noticing that, now I had a chance to respond. And I could be like, okay, well, how am I going to approach this with more integrity? And that's when I said, you know what, whatever happens, happens. It might be good, it might be bad, it might go viral, it might not, but it doesn't matter. Of course, I want to do this for the impact it's going to make in the world and have the biggest chance for reach and make an impact, right? But at the end of the day, who am I becoming? And I've realized when I started to shift my mindset from when I do this thing versus, wow, I'm really becoming a professional now in my speaking. I'm really getting deeper in noticing my blind spots and noticing, oh, I'm out of integrity. Now I have an opportunity to lean into that and make some positive change. So I mentioned that one of my favorite movies is this Pixar film called Soul, right? And our friend Joe, he's the main character who achieved his dream only to feel more, we'll call it disappointed. So by the end of the movie, this is after Joe achieves his dream, he's asked a simple question. And it might not be that simple, I'll let you guys decide, but here's the question. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? To which Joe responds, I'm not sure, but I do know I'm going to live every minute of it. So I ask you, how are you going to live every minute of your life? Thank you.